After my son died, my daughter-in-law threw me out. She had no idea who she was messing with. I moved into Brian's house the day after his diagnosis. He didn't ask, I just came. Packed a single suitcase, left the back porch light on at my place, and drove the 2 hours north without stopping. Tina met me at the door. She hugged me, briefly, and said, "We're so glad you're here." Her voice was flat, but the house smelled like fresh sheets and chicken broth. I took that as a sign. At first, everything was quiet. Not peaceful, not really. But quiet in the way grief makes things, hushed, suspended. I woke early to make coffee, sliced apples for the kids' lunchboxes, scrubbed casserole dishes before Tina could pile them in the sink. Brian's eyes followed me in the mornings. He'd smile, softly, faintly. He never said thank you. He didn't need to. Tina busied herself with logistics. Appointments, calls, insurance. I stayed in the background, folding his sweaters, restocking the tissues, listening for the kettle's whistle. The children adjusted quickly, too quickly, I thought. Emma clung to me during thunderstorms. Caleb asked if I would always live with them now. I said, for as long as I'm needed. Most evenings ended the same way, Tina in the den on her laptop, Brian resting in the recliner, the children quiet behind closed doors. I washed the last dish slowly, letting the warm water soothe my hands. Sometimes I'd find a tea mug left on the windowsill or a trail of school papers on the stairs. I never said anything, I just gathered, straightened, returned things to their places. But even in that quiet, I could feel something shifting. Tina began watching me from across the room, not with anger or grief, but with something colder. Something strategic. One evening, as I folded Brian's cardigans in the laundry room, she stepped in and said, without looking at me, "Maine, we'll need to talk soon." About space. She said it like she was discussing furniture. Not family. And in that moment, I understood that the house was no longer holding us together. It was holding us apart, quietly, inevitably. After Brian passed, the rhythm of the house changed. Tina didn't cry in front of me. Not once. Not even the morning we returned from the hospital and I found his toothbrush still wet in its cup. The house was too still, too orderly. The children were subdued, polite and cautious in their sadness, as if they understood they had to grieve quietly, to match their mother's tone. I kept busy. Laundry, mostly. There's something about clean linen that steadies a person. I folded his sweaters again, not because they needed folding, but because I wasn't ready to put them away. The gray one with the worn elbows, the navy one he wore to family dinners. I laid them one over the other on the bed, smoothing the sleeves flat like he might return any moment and want them just so. Tina started speaking less. She no longer said good morning when I brought in the newspaper. She tapped her phone during breakfast, took her coffee to the den, and stayed there. I noticed the shift in small things first. Her sighs when I moved too slowly in the kitchen. The way she rewashed plates I'd already dried. How she began texting the babysitter on days I was home and perfectly able. My name vanished from group texts. She began introducing me differently, to neighbors, to the hospice counselor who came by with a pamphlet on loss. "This is Brian's mother," she'd say, smiling thinly, as if it were some distant title I'd once held but no longer deserved. Not the kid's grandma. Not Nain. Brian's absence sat heavy at the table, but Tina didn't speak of him. When the children brought up memories, she redirected. "Why don't you draw a picture for Daddy?" she'd say. "Let's keep things positive." They stopped mentioning him after a while. One afternoon, I reminded her, gently, that Brian had wanted me to stay. "He said that in the hospital," I said, as we stood by the sink. "He said I should be here. For the children. For you." She didn't turn to face me. Just dried her hands slowly and said, "Brian said a lot of things, when he was on medication." The silence that followed was louder than any shout. That evening, I sat in the guest room, folding and refolding a pillowcase just to have something in my hands. On the dresser sat a photograph of me and Brian at his high school graduation. He wore that same quiet smile, the one he gave me during his last days. I held the frame, traced the edge of his cap with my thumb, and felt the first true coldness of widowhood settle in. Exactly 1 week after the funeral, Tina came into the room. She didn't knock. Her arms were folded, and the light from the hallway backlit her figure, making her look like a silhouette, sharp-edged and unreadable. "You need to leave," she said. "Tomorrow." I blinked, my hand still on Brian's gray cardigan. I have nowhere to go," I said quietly. She shrugged. "You're a grown woman. Figure it out." She turned then, smoothing her hair in the hallway mirror. Her voice floated back, detached and measured. "And please, no scenes with the kids. They've had enough drama." She left the door open behind her. The hallway light fell across the floor like a line I was meant not to cross. That night, I packed in silence. I didn't cry. Not then. My fingers trembled as I placed my clothes into the same suitcase I'd arrived with. I left the sweaters. I couldn't take them with me. Not yet. I left the photo too, maybe because I thought she'd let the children keep it. Or maybe because I couldn't bear to look at it again. I slept in the car behind a 24-hour diner for the next 2 weeks. There was a parking lot light that flickered through the windshield. I'd wake before dawn, wash up in the diner bathroom, and eat toast with jam. The waitress, a girl named Mandy, always said ma'am without looking me in the eye. I don't think she knew I was sleeping out back. Every morning, I'd drive by the school just to see the children at recess. Emma always wore her coat unzipped, even in the cold. Caleb ran in wide circles around the jungle gym. They didn't see me. That was the point. I thought I might hate Tina. But I didn't. Hate requires too much attention. What I felt was quieter. Deeper. A cooling of something inside that used to burn. I started driving past apartment complexes, scanning the for rent signs. Not because I wanted to stay in town. Just to know that space still existed. That I could begin again, somewhere. Then, one morning, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. I almost ignored it. "Mrs. Peterson?" the voice asked. "This is Robert Chen. I was your son's attorney. There are matters in his will that concern you, urgently." He asked if I could meet him in his downtown office. I drove there without thinking, still wearing the cardigan I'd slept in. His office was on the 10th floor, with wide windows and a view of the river that didn't impress me. He poured me a glass of water. Slid a folder across the desk. Brian had anticipated everything. He had left me a trust, managed discreetly. $7 million. The number didn't register at first. It felt like fiction. But the documents were real, witnessed, notarized, signed in Brian's unsteady handwriting just 3 weeks before he passed. There was more. A clause written into his will. If Tina removed me from the home, or blocked me from access to the children, full custody of Emma and Caleb would transfer to me. He had recorded a statement, too. Mr. Chen clicked play. Brian's voice filled the room, quiet, hoarse, but clear. "I want my mother to stay with the children," he said. "If Tina forces her out or interferes with that, then I want custody assigned to my mother, Nane Peterson. This isn't out of spite. It's for their protection." There was a pause in the recording. Then he added, "I know Tina. I know what she's capable of. And I trust my mother." The recording ended. I sat still. My hands were folded in my lap. I didn't speak. Mr. Chen said we could act immediately. That the will had been filed, and the court would honor Brian's wishes. I nodded once. When we stood, he asked, "Would you like me to arrange transportation?" I said no. I'd drive myself. That afternoon, I returned to the house, accompanied by Mr. Chen, a police officer, and a woman from child welfare. Tina opened the door. When she saw me, her face changed. Not with sadness. With fear. What is this? She snapped. You can't just take my kids. We showed her the documents. Played the recording. She stumbled back into her white leather sofa, speechless. When she heard $7 million trust, she went pale. But I'm their mother, she whispered. You are, I said. But that no longer means what you think it does. She didn't cry. Not at first. She begged. Then accused. Then threatened. I said nothing. The officer helped me pack the children's belongings. There wasn't much. Tina had donated most of their toys during her decluttering phase. As I walked Emma and Caleb to the car, Tina stood at the doorway. She looked smaller. Not physically. Spiritually. You can't do this to me, she whispered. I looked her in the eyes. I'm not doing this to you, I said. Brian is. Then I closed the door behind me. Quietly. Completely. Our new house sat at the edge of town, tucked behind a row of overgrown hedges and flanked by a fence that leaned a little more every week. It was nothing like Tina's sleek suburban dream, no open concept, no polished marble, no curated minimalism. But it was ours. And more importantly, it wasn't hers. I let the children pick their own rooms. Caleb chose the one with the crooked window latch because he liked the way it clicked when it closed. Emma picked the room with the slanted ceiling and a built-in bookshelf that smelled faintly of lavender and dust. She filled it with drawings of her father, some in crayon, some in pencil, each one with the same quiet smile he'd worn at the kitchen table. We lived simply. The furniture was mismatched, donated by neighbors or bought cheap from estate sales. The couch sagged in the middle. The dining table wobbled slightly if you leaned too hard on one side. But the house had warmth. The kind that isn't bought, just made. I cooked real meals again. Not casseroles to freeze or bland things for sick days, but the food I used to make when Brian was small, chicken dumplings from scratch, cinnamon rolls with too much icing, green beans cooked low and slow until they practically melted. Emma always helped with the dough. Caleb set the table without asking. No one sighed when I moved too slowly. No one corrected how I rinsed the dishes. Pancake Sundays returned, a tradition Brian and I started when he was 5. We didn't have much then, but we had flour, eggs, and time. The kids took to it instantly. Emma stirred the batter like she was painting. Caleb insisted on making one pancake shaped like a dinosaur every week. It never looked like a dinosaur, but we pretended. They agreed, of course. Sometimes in quiet moments when the lights were low and the house was still, Emma would crawl into my lap and whisper, "I miss Daddy." I'd hold her and say, "So do I." Caleb would retreat into silence, drawing for hours with his headphones on, then burst into tears over something as small as a broken pencil. I never told them to be strong. I told them to be true. That was enough. I made space for Brian in every room. His photo hung in the hallway, the one where he held both children at a fair, a plush bear under one arm, cotton candy in the other. I framed his high school medal for track and hung it above Caleb's desk. Emma wore one of his old t-shirts as a nightgown. We spoke of him daily. Not in reverence, but in rhythm. No lawyers. No drama. Just healing. Then, 6 months later, Tina showed up. It was Emma's birthday. She turned 8 that Tuesday. We held a small party, just the 3 of us, plus the neighbor's twins and a cake we made ourselves. I was cutting the last slice when the doorbell rang. Tina stood on the porch holding a shiny gift bag and wearing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I brought something for Emma," she said, voice low, hands trembling just slightly. She looked thinner. Her hair, always perfectly smooth, was frizzy in places. Her coat didn't match her shoes. I almost didn't recognize her. I didn't invite her in. Emma peeked from behind the door. "Mom?" she asked, uncertain. Tina crouched. "Hi, sweet pea. Happy birthday." I was wondering if I could take you and Caleb for ice cream. Just an hour. Emma looked up at me. I studied Tina. Her voice wasn't sharp. Her eyes weren't cold. But still, I remembered. All right, I said. I'll come too. She didn't argue. We sat at a tiny table in a strip mall ice cream shop, the kind with sticky floors and fluorescent lighting. The children chatted about school. Caleb ordered bubblegum swirl. Tina barely touched her cone. She watched them carefully, like someone trying to remember a language they'd once spoken fluently. When it was time to leave, she buckled Emma's seatbelt and turned to me. I never understood, she said softly. How much they needed you. I said nothing. There was nothing to add. Not now. She drove us back to the house, parked carefully, and waited as the children ran inside. I lost everything, she said. Not with anger. Just truth. The house. The job. No one trusts me anymore. I nodded. She didn't ask to come in. She didn't mention the money. She just sat in the car for a moment longer, then drove away. That night, Emma curled beside me on the couch. Her fingers traced the embroidery on my cardigan. Grandma Nain, she whispered, are you going to leave again? I brushed the hair from her forehead and kissed the spot just above her eyebrow, the same place Brian used to kiss her goodnight. Never, I said. Some people lose family. Others become it. She nodded, already drifting to sleep. The room was quiet. The kind of quiet that comes not from absence, but from peace. Autumn came early that year. The maple in our backyard turned before the others, deep crimson, its leaves falling fast, one by one, like quiet resignations. I raked them each afternoon while the children were at school. The sound of the rake moving through the grass was comforting. Predictable. We had settled into something that felt real. Not perfect. Not easy. But steady. The children called our house the real house now. They still referred to Tina's place as the quiet one or the place with the silver sofa. Their words, not mine. Caleb stopped asking about the custody order. He never fully understood it, I think, just that something shifted and now I was the one who picked him up from school, who signed the forms, who made the dentist appointments. He didn't ask for explanations. He just adjusted. Emma, on the other hand, carried her grief with precision. She folded her emotions neatly, like her socks. She rarely cried. But when she did, it came sudden and whole, then was gone. We didn't talk about Tina often. But when we did, I never corrected their memories. I let them hold on to whatever version of her they needed. I wasn't trying to erase her. I simply wasn't letting her erase me. The trust Brian left remained untouched. Mr. Chin handled everything with quiet efficiency. He'd call once a month to check in, always asking if I needed anything. I always said no. Because I didn't. Not anymore. The money gave us freedom, but I never let it change us. I bought a better mattress, replaced the old radiator, got Caleb a new backpack when his straps tore. But I still mended my sweaters with the same gray thread I'd used for years. Still clipped coupons from the Sunday paper. Not because I had to. Because it grounded me. One morning in late October, I opened the mailbox and found a cream-colored envelope addressed in Tina's handwriting. Inside was a letter. Dear Nain. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect anything, really. I just want you to know I've been seeing someone, therapist, I mean. They said I should write to you. So here I am. I was angry after Brian died. At him. At you. Mostly at myself. I blamed you because you were still here. You did everything I couldn't. You showed up. That shamed me more than I could admit. I didn't know how to be enough for the kids, so I told myself you were too much. But I see it now. They needed you. And you gave them everything. I can't undo what I said. But I want to say thank you. For not abandoning them. For not abandoning me. Even when I made it easy to. Tina. I reread it 3 times. Then folded it and tucked it into the drawer beside the phone, between old postcards and rubber bands. I didn't reply. Some things don't require answers. Winter was kind to us. Light snow, short storms, cozy mornings with oatmeal and storybooks. We celebrated Brian's birthday in December. Emma baked the cake, vanilla with blueberry frosting. Caleb lit the candles. We sang in soft voices, standing in the kitchen with our socks on. No guests. No fanfare. Just memory. That night, I sat by the window while the children slept. The house was quiet again. But not like before. Not empty. Not watchful. Safe. I thought of Brian often. Not as a ghost, not as someone I'd lost, but as someone who'd anchored me through a storm I never saw coming. He had seen it all. He had planned for it. And in doing so, he had saved us. One evening in January, the school counselor called. Emma had been drawing pictures, complicated ones. A family in a house, but the mother was always outside the door. Should we be concerned? The counselor asked gently. No, I said. She's just telling the truth. The counselor hesitated. Would you be willing to let her mother see the drawings? We're not suggesting anything, just processing. I paused. Then said yes. Tina arrived a few days later. She didn't ask to come inside. I met her on the porch, handed her a manila folder with Emma's sketches. She looked thinner still. But calmer. More herself. She's honest, Tina said, flipping through the pages. Brutally so. She always has been, I replied. She held the folder close. Thank you for letting me see this. I didn't respond. She hesitated at the steps. Do they ask about me? Sometimes, I said. But less than before. She nodded, looking down. I'm not trying to get them back, she said quickly. I know I don't have a case. I wanted to say that aloud. So you'd know. I looked at her carefully. That's not the thing I needed to hear. But it's the right thing to say. She left quietly. That night, I tucked the children in with a little more care than usual. Smoothed their blankets. Sat beside Emma until her breathing deepened into sleep. Then I stood in the hallway and stared at the framed photo of Brian for a long time. His smile still hadn't faded. February was gray in the way only February can be, cold without snow, dim without drama. The kind of days that seem to hang between seasons, neither here nor there. The children grew quiet again, not sad, just inward. Caleb spent hours with his model trains, lining up each car with care and adjusting the tracks like an engineer on a deadline only he understood. Emma took to writing letters she never sent, folded slips of paper addressed to no one, tucked into the back of her notebooks. I never asked what they said. I spent most mornings in the garden, digging through the brittle soil. There wasn't much to tend, not yet. But the motion helped. It reminded me that things still grow, even if you can't see them. One Thursday afternoon, a letter arrived from the court. A formal update. The custody arrangement was now finalized, irrevocably so. Sole guardianship awarded. My name, on thick paper, sealed and stamped. The final line read. No further challenge will be entertained. I held the letter a long time. Not with triumph. With quiet finality. That weekend, Mr. Chen stopped by to review the last updates on the trust. He wore the same navy overcoat and carried the same briefcase he'd had on the day of the hearing. You've done well, he said after we finished. Brian would be settled in this. I didn't answer at first. I poured us both tea, chamomile for him, black with milk for me. I don't think settled was what Brian ever wanted for me, I said quietly. He wanted me to be free. Mr. Chen nodded once. And are you? I didn't reply. Instead, I reached into the side drawer of the china cabinet and pulled out a small box. Inside was a stack of old photographs, some of Brian, some of James, a few of the children when they were smaller. "I've been thinking of moving," I said, though I hadn't meant to say it out loud. Mr. Chen raised an eyebrow. "Not far," I added. "Just, elsewhere. Somewhere new. Somewhere without echoes." He said nothing, just sipped his tea. The silence between us held no pressure. Later that evening, I told the children. Not as a question. As a possibility. "We might move," I said, folding laundry on the couch. "Somewhere with trees. A bigger garden. Maybe a creek." Emma didn't look up from her sketchpad. "Will it still be ours?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Everywhere we are together is ours." She nodded and went back to drawing. Caleb asked if he could still bring his trains. I said yes. All of them. 2 weeks later, I found a listing online, a small house just outside the edge of town, nestled against a slope with a long gravel drive and an old barn in the back. The photos showed sunlight falling through tall windows, a kitchen with chipped tile, and a living room paneled in dark wood. It reminded me of the home I grew up in. Not fancy. But honest. We went to see it on a Tuesday. Emma stood in the middle of the empty yard and whispered, "It feels like a beginning." I signed the papers that Friday. We packed slowly. Carefully. Each item chosen. Nothing rushed. I left behind things I thought I'd always need: the tea kettle Brian gave me when he moved out, the rocking chair from Tina's house, the curtains I had sewn when I first moved in. Some things carry too much weight. Some things stop belonging to you even while they're still in your hands. The children said goodbye to the house like old friends. Caleb ran his hand along the banister as we left. Emma stood on the porch and took one last picture with her Polaroid camera. On move-in day, I found a letter tucked into the mailbox of the new house. No envelope. Just folded once, carefully. "Nain. You were right. About everything. Thank you for loving them. Even when I didn't know how. T. I didn't show it to the children. Some things are meant to end in quiet. That first night in the new house, we ate soup on the floor, no furniture yet, just blankets and bowls. The wind howled through the trees and made the windows rattle. But we were warm. Full. Later, as I tucked the children into their new rooms, Emma looked up at me and said, "Daddy would like it here." I smiled. "I think he already does." The house was smaller, older, a little stubborn in the way old places can be. But it held us gently. And when I turned out the lights, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Not peace. Not pride. But presence. Brian was still gone. That never changed. But in this place, in this life we were making, he was not lost. Spring came slowly to the new house. The grass remained patchy through March, and the trees were reluctant, buds tight like fists. But inside, something had softened. The children found their rhythm quickly. Emma spent long hours reading in the wide windowsill of her room, while Caleb took over the barn, turning it into a chaotic empire of cardboard cities and paper airplanes. He called it the garage for imaginary things. I finally unpacked the last box on a rainy Thursday. It was labeled simply, "Kitchen Drawer." Inside, I found pieces of a life once lived, rubber bands, mismatched screws, a birthday candle shaped like a number 5, a grocery list in Brian's handwriting. Milk, bread, batteries, carrots. His are always curled downward at the end. I sat at the table for a long time with that paper in my hand. Just holding it. Just remembering how small and manageable life once seemed. It was sometime in April when Tina's name appeared again, this time as a contact on my phone. I didn't answer. But she tried again. And again. Eventually, I picked up. "I'm not calling to fight," she said. Her voice was hoarse, almost hollow. "I just wanted to say I've been clean for 4 months. Therapy. Group support. All of it. I didn't ask what clean meant. I didn't ask what happened after the hearing. She continued. I know I can't undo anything. But I wanted to say I'm sorry. Not for custody. Not for the money. For the way I spoke to you. For how I made the children feel. I waited. Let the silence hold her words. She asked if she could visit. Not for long. Just once. I told her I'd think about it. That night, I sat with Emma and Caleb on the porch swing. The wind was warm. The air smelled of pine and coming rain. If your mom wanted to see you, I asked quietly, would that be all right? Caleb shrugged. She's still my mom. Emma said nothing for a long time. Then, softly, I think she misses us. I nodded. So the visit happened. Tina arrived in an old sedan that didn't suit her. She wore jeans and no makeup. She brought a book for Caleb and a beaded bracelet for Emma. She didn't bring apologies, not directly. But she brought something quieter. A kind of slowness. A willingness to listen. She sat on the porch while the children played tag around the maple tree. She didn't ask to come inside. I understand why they love it here, she said finally. There's no noise. No performance, I added. She nodded. I thought I was doing what was best for them, she said. Back then. We all tell ourselves that, I replied. When it was time to leave, she hugged the children carefully, like she didn't trust her arms to do it right. Emma stood still. Caleb hugged back. She turned to me before getting into the car. Would it be all right if I wrote to them? I nodded. After she drove off, Emma came to me, held my hand, and whispered, she was softer today. She was trying, I said. Trying, yes. But that didn't undo what had been done. Over the next month, letters came. Folded carefully. One for each child. Emma read hers aloud. Caleb kept his under his pillow. And then one day, an envelope arrived addressed to me. Nain. Thank you for not shutting the door. Even when I deserved it slammed. They are thriving. I see it. And I see you. Not as a rival. Not as an obstacle. But as what I could never be. And that's okay now. Tina. I folded the letter and placed it alongside the others in a small box I kept near the bed. Not forgiveness. But record. One evening, as we cleaned up after dinner, Emma asked me a question. Grandma, do you think we'll ever all have dinner together again? Me, Caleb, Mom, you? I didn't rush to answer. Then I said, maybe. But only if no one forgets the truth. She nodded. The table was small in our new house. 4 chairs. We never added a fifth. I thought about it sometimes. Whether I would. Whether I should. But the truth was, we had room. For peace. For questions. Even, in small doses, for remorse. What we didn't have was room for forgetting. Brian's photo stayed on the mantel. Not as a shrine. But as a witness. He had seen all of this coming. And he had loved us enough to prepare. He gave me the tools. But it was I who built the life. Quietly. Firmly. One brick of trust at a time. Tina's letters slowed in the summer. Not because she stopped caring, I think, but because life began reclaiming its space. The children filled their days with sun and movement, bikes down the gravel path, hours in the backyard with sprinkler arcs and barefoot races. Caleb caught grasshoppers and named them after planets. Emma read chapter books aloud under the maple, one leg always swinging, always free. I let them drift farther each day. Not away from me, but toward themselves. One Tuesday morning, the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but answered anyway. Ms. Peterson, the voice asked. This is Laura Teague. I'm with the Department of Family Trusts. We're conducting a routine audit on several charitable structures linked to your son's estate. Do you have a few minutes? I sat down. The audit, as she called it, was harmless, just a review of documentation. Nothing was amiss. But she asked, as part of it, if I had maintained primary residence at the listed address. I assured her I had. At the end, she paused. I have to say, she added, most trusts of this size come with long strings and frequent disputes. Yours is unusually clean. I've never seen one written with such clarity of intent. I thanked her, hung up, and sat still for a long while. Brian had not only protected me. He had made me undeniable. That afternoon, I noticed a car slow in front of the house. White. Older. Familiar. Tina. She didn't get out. Just sat in the driver's seat for a few minutes. Then pulled away. The next day, a package arrived. No note. Just a plain cardboard box. Inside, wrapped in tissue, was a photo album. Handwritten in the corner, for them. It was filled with pictures of Brian. Not the usual ones. Not posed or formal. Candid moments, him reading to Emma in her crib, lifting Caleb onto his shoulders, half smiling while washing dishes, asleep on the couch with a baby bottle slipping from his fingers. Moments I hadn't seen. Moments I had lived beside, but not captured. There were even a few of me. One, in particular, me in the garden, holding a trowel, looking up toward the camera, surprised, maybe mid-laugh. Tina had taken that photo. I remembered now. I called her that evening. She answered on the first ring. Thank you, I said. For what? For the album. She exhaled softly. They should have those memories. We didn't speak long. But when I hung up, I knew something had passed between us. Not peace. But permission. To stop fighting. Then, 2 days later, came the letter. From Tina's attorney. Official. Cold. Final. A request for shared visitation. Not custody. Not contest. Just 1 weekend a month. 2 weeks in summer. The children, it said, had a right to access both sides of their family. That the environment here had been stable, but exclusive. That it was time for repair. I held the letter in my lap. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I walked out to the porch, sat on the swing, and listened to the night. Then I went inside and packed a small bag. Early the next morning, I drove to Mr. Chen's office. He read the letter carefully, then looked at me. She's testing the waters, he said. She's not pushing for a full petition. But she's opening the door. I nodded. Do you want to contest? I shook my head. No, I said. I want to define the terms. We worked for hours. I insisted on neutral drop-offs. No overnights at her residence until reviewed. Supervised visits for the first 6 months. A review panel at the end of the year. Are you sure you want to offer this much? Mr. Chen asked gently. You're not obligated. I'm sure, I said. I want to show the children what boundaries look like. What grace looks like, too. The agreement was delivered that Friday. Tina signed without revision. The first visit was a park outing. I came too, sitting on a distant bench, watching as she helped Caleb fly a kite, listened to Emma's latest book report. Her movements were hesitant, her smile cautious. But they were hers. And the children didn't flinch. When they returned to me at the end, they were quiet. But not withdrawn. Was it all right? I asked. Emma nodded. She tried really hard. Caleb shrugged. She smells different now. Like mints and soap. That night, after they fell asleep, I stood in the hallway outside their rooms. Brian's photo hung just between their doors, where the light always caught his eyes. He had given me the power to protect them. Now, I was learning how to give it back. Gently. With care. Not because Tina deserved it. But because the children did. By summer's end, the air began to carry that dry, golden quiet that always made me think of new pencils and fading grass. The children were different somehow, taller, more certain in their skin. Emma began braiding her own hair in the mornings and Caleb started answering the phone without glancing at me first. Little signs. But clear ones. The visits with Tina continued. Always supervised. Always neutral spaces. Sometimes it was a library. Sometimes a corner table at the local diner. Never the house. That was the rule. Tina respected it. The children were cautious at first, measuring their steps like people walking across a half-frozen lake. But Tina didn't push. She listened. Asked questions. Laughed gently when Caleb made jokes. Complimented Emma's spelling tests without going overboard. Once, she arrived late. She looked pale, winded. Car trouble, she said breathlessly. But I noticed the bruise on her wrist, half hidden by a sleeve. She saw me seeing it, and said nothing. I didn't ask. I didn't need to. Because when people lose everything, they often find someone else just as broken to cling to, or blame. A week later, Tina called to say she had moved again. Smaller place. Just me now, she said. I needed less. That was all. I told her I was glad she was safe. She didn't reply. Just exhaled like that answer alone had startled her. Back at home, life moved slowly, the way I like it. I hung herbs from the kitchen rafters to dry. Emma helped me sew new cushion covers in a print she called Serious Flowers. Caleb painted a mural on the side of the barn, planets, mostly, and a single red kite. Mr. Chen stopped by one afternoon with final paperwork. The trust's second audit had cleared, and a portion was now being directed into a small college fund for the children. Brian's planning had covered every corner. After Mr. Chen left, I sat in the garden with a glass of iced tea, staring out at the yard. It was wild in places, stubborn with weeds. I didn't mind. Not all things need trimming. The children ran barefoot through the sprinkler, squealing. Their shadows fell long and strange across the grass, a tangle of limbs and light. I thought then of the early days, just after Brian died. The way the silence back then was heavy and airless, filled with things unsaid. Now, silence felt like something earned. A calm built slowly, unfolded laundry and pancakes and bedtime stories read in soft voices. Emma turned 9 in September. Tina brought a book of pressed flowers and a handwritten poem. Nothing store-bought. Nothing flashy. She didn't stay long. Afterward, Emma said, "She's quieter now." Yes, I said. That can be a kind of strength. The children had grown into this life, not despite what happened, but because of it. They knew where love lived now. Not in promises, but in consistency. Not in grand declarations, but in who showed up. Again and again. I kept Brian's photo above the fireplace. I didn't talk to it. Didn't pray. But sometimes, I'd glance at it in the evenings, when the light turned the glass soft gold, and I'd think. You chose well. Not money. Not vengeance. You gave me a tool. Choice. And I used it not to punish. Not to retaliate. But to hold the line. For them. And, finally, for myself. We were not rich in the way people often think. I drove an old sedan. Bought dented cans from the clearance shelf. Re-wore sweaters until their elbows frayed. But we had a full pantry. A quiet house. A calendar filled with small, beautiful things, library days, garden chores, poetry recitals, Tuesday pancakes. And when the wind swept through the trees, it no longer felt like something knocking. It felt like breath. Like home. It was early October when Tina appeared again, not by phone, not with a letter, but in person, unannounced. I saw her from the kitchen window, standing just beyond the front gate, arms crossed, the wind pulling her hair sideways. She didn't wave. Just waited. I opened the door, stepped out, and met her halfway down the path. "I brought something," she said, lifting a paper bag. "Just cookies." It was a brittle attempt at ease. I nodded and took the bag. We stood there, both quiet. "I didn't want to disrupt," she said. "You're not," I replied. "Unless you ask to." She nodded. "I know I don't belong here," she said. "But I wanted to say something. Just once. While looking you in the eye." I waited. "I used to think you were judging me," she said. "The way you'd sweep in, fix things, move so quietly. I thought you were trying to replace me." "And now?" I asked. She shifted. "Now I see you were holding everything I dropped. Without complaint. Without asking." She glanced up at the house. I saw her eyes catch the barn, the swing, the line of laundry. The ordinary signs of a home made and kept. "You kept them whole," she whispered. And I was too broken to try. She didn't cry. She looked as if she might, but she didn't. "I'm not asking for anything," she added. "Not more time. Not custody. Just, if they want to see me on their terms, I'll be around." I nodded again. "That's up to them." She turned to go, then paused. "I was cruel," she said, her voice lower. "After Brian died. I said things I can't unsay. I didn't offer her comfort. I didn't diminish it." "You were grieving," I said. "But grief doesn't excuse cruelty. It just explains it." She nodded once. Then she left. That night, Emma came to me in the kitchen. "Was that Mom today?" "Yes." "What did she want?" "Just to speak." Emma thought about that for a moment, then said, "She looks tired." "She is." Later, after the children were asleep, I sat alone in the living room. The photo of Brian above the mantel caught the dim lamplight. I studied his eyes. Still kind. Still knowing. I remembered the months after he was born, how uncertain I felt, how raw. The way I'd stare at him, terrified of doing everything wrong. And how my own mother had come, not to instruct, but to stay quietly beside me. Folding onesies. Rocking him. Making tea. Just present. Now, years later, I had done the same. Not by instruction. But by instinct. I wasn't Tina's mother. But I had become something steadier to her. Not a replacement. A mirror. A few days later, a note appeared in the mailbox. Not addressed to me. Emma opened it first. Read it silently. Then handed it to me. It was from Tina. Just 2 sentences. "If you ever want to ask me questions, I will answer them all. No lies this time." Emma folded the note and tucked it into her desk drawer without a word. She didn't say whether she would write back. I didn't ask. Some things take the shape of readiness before they take the shape of speech. Caleb mentioned Tina less and less. Not out of bitterness, but because he had filled the space she once occupied with new things, science kits, a newfound obsession with birds, a friend named Max who lived 2 houses down and had a trampoline. One Saturday, Caleb climbed into my lap with a book about falcons and asked, "If someone doesn't stay, does that mean they don't care?" I thought carefully. "No," I said. "Sometimes people leave because they care in a way they don't know how to hold." He nodded slowly, then returned to his reading. That was enough. The trees began to turn in earnest by mid-October. The maple in our yard became a crown of flame. The children collected leaves in a shoebox labeled for pressing. Each morning felt more like memory, crisp, brief, golden. One afternoon, Emma pulled a chair beside me at the table. "I think I'll write to her," she said. I didn't ask who. I just said, "Would you like a fresh envelope?" She nodded. That evening, as I did the dishes, I saw her through the kitchen door, sitting cross-legged on the porch, pen moving carefully across lined paper. She didn't show me the letter. She didn't need to. When she finished, she brought it to me to mail. I held it briefly. It was addressed simply, Mom. She had sealed it with a sticker shaped like a crescent moon. That night, as I tucked her in, she asked, "Do you think she'll write back?" "Yes," I said. And she did. It was nearly winter again when I realized the house had finally settled. Not just in its foundation or its routines, but in us. The children no longer whispered when they said Brian's name. Emma no longer cried when a familiar song came on the radio. Caleb no longer asked if Tina would come back and live here again. The house had taken the shape of our life, a smaller, quieter life, but one that fit. Letters still came from Tina, sometimes twice a month, sometimes not at all. They were always addressed separately, always written in pen. No typing, no emails. I read none of them, but I knew by the children's posture whether a good one had arrived. Emma kept hers in a ribboned box on her bookshelf. Caleb tucked his between comic books. He never said much, but once, after reading one, he whispered, "She's learning." And that was enough. One afternoon, Emma came home with a painting from art class, just color, no form. Big swirls of navy and green. She said it was about people who don't leave, even when the wind tries to push them out. I hung it on the fridge. We didn't talk about the trust anymore. About the money. About what Brian had set up or what it shielded us from. Those things became background, like good insulation, silent and steady. The warmth of our life wasn't measured in assets. It was in Emma's laugh when she beat me at Scrabble. In the way Caleb ran inside shouting, I saw a hawk. Sometimes, I'd wake in the middle of the night, the house too quiet. I'd walk the hallway, check on each child. Just to be sure. And one night, near Christmas, I heard Caleb whispering in his sleep. Just one word, Nain. It stopped me. Held me still in the doorway like a prayer. In the morning, he didn't remember it. But I did. I remembered everything. One morning in December, a letter arrived addressed to me. From Tina. I sat at the table, tea cooling, and unfolded it. Nain. I know I don't have a place in your life. And I'm not asking for one. But I wanted to tell you something. After the custody hearing, I was angry. Not just at you. At myself. At Brian. At how life rearranged me in ways I didn't consent to. But time does something. It scrapes off pride, if you let it. Watching you parent the children the way I couldn't, it used to feel like a wound. Now, it feels like relief. They are safe. They are whole. You did that. And in a strange way, I think Brian saved me by choosing you. Because I was never going to get there alone. You don't need to answer this. I don't expect forgiveness. But I wanted you to know, the person I was then isn't the person I'm trying to become now. Thank you. Tina. I read it twice. Then folded it gently and placed it in the drawer beneath the sugar jar. I didn't reply. That evening, Emma crawled into my lap like she hadn't in years. I don't worry anymore, she said. I used to worry you'd leave too. But I don't. I kissed her head. You never have to worry about that. And Caleb, from the couch, added, You're the roof now. I looked at him, startled. The roof? He nodded. You don't make a lot of noise. But you keep the weather out. I smiled. Not wide. Just enough. That night, after they were in bed, I sat by the fireplace, Brian's photo watching over the mantel. I poured myself a small cup of tea, added a little honey, and listened to the clock tick. Outside, the wind picked up. But the house, our house, didn't flinch. And neither did I.